With us today, Athena Demetrios. She's a makeup artist here in Los Angeles, and Shari Levy is a nurse who grew up in Los Angeles. Welcome. Thanks for coming on the show. Appreciate you being here. Levy? Levy? Levy?
Shari.
Shari. Okay, Shari. Now, Shari, you claim that you have actually met extraterrestrials. That they've, well, tell us about it. Why you?
Well, I'm not exclusive. I don't consider myself superior or chosen. I think I'm one of probably a large percentage of the people who populate this planet who have interacted with other races, knowingly or unknowingly.
Okay, I must be on the unknowing side, or maybe they just didn't get to me yet. But I don't want to make fun of this. You know, a lot of people do, and they, you know, maybe want to ridicule you for this. But I believe you're sincere, and I want to know, what did they look like?
Well, I've met with two races. The race that predominantly has been in our lives has been what I'm told are called little grays. They're a race of beings that are diminutive in size.
About yay? Stop me when I get right.
About 4 feet tall. About 4 feet tall,
okay.
With the exception of one who I call the head honcho, who appears now and then, who can be as tall as 8 feet tall.
Uh-huh.
And
otherwise looks exactly the same as the short guys. Is that right? Okay.
Mm-hmm.
And the other race is?
Very much human-like, just like you and I.
Uh-huh. Okay. These gray people, I mean, what do they? What's their skin look like? What do their eyes look like? What are their hands like?
They're not actually gray. Their skin is actually more white, but it appears to me that their internal organs, unlike ours being a whole mishmash of a lot of different colored stuff, is it seems they have just very few organs, primarily gray. It looks like the gray matter of our brains.
And how would you know about their internal organs?
Well, because I can see it through their skin. Appears to be very onion skin-like,
so
and I believe that's where it gives the impression that they're gray.
Uh-huh. Do they transmit any sort of message to you? Do they talk to you, communicate, what do they say?
In a nutshell?
Well, give me the highlights.
The magnitude. Well, you're asking me a question that reaches through many avenues of life: spiritual, technological, all kinds of things.
Again, let's stick to that. I mean, you could wrap up Christianity and do unto others. So do that with the aliens for me. I mean, what's their primary message seem to be, if you can?
Basically, and I don't claim to have the answers. I want that clear. These are my experiences and the answers as I perceive them. Is that, first of all, they're not new intervening here. They were here long, long ago, and at some point intervened with what we call the human race, or Homo sapiens, and did some sort of genetic altering to enhance the species that we call...
And they've told you this?
Yes.
Did they say when they did this genetic altering?
It was a long time ago, but I only have a visual picture. I'm not qualified.
Long time ago, like centuries? Long time ago, like thousands of years, millions of years?
When Homo sapiens were just becoming upright and mobile and beginning to learn the very, very basics.
So that would be millions, perhaps?
Yes.
Okay. Athena, you too have seen aliens. Did they look like the ones that Shari describes?
I've had experiences with a couple different races. And I had probably one of the most profound, and before I even get started in that, I have to say that I don't feel like an abductee. I prefer to think of myself as a contactee, because I put out mentally one night for communication, if any existed that I really would like to know, and I'd love to communicate with them. And
that's when they arrived?
No, it wasn't right then, but it was after, maybe a month and a half, 2 months after.
You wanted to see aliens
first,
and then they came.
Well, I've always felt a sense of homesickness when I've looked up at the sky at night. I've always been a real soul searcher, and that's just part of my nature. And I've always really sought to find answers about things. I was in bed one night, and I sat up, and I saw two in the bedroom, and one was walking towards me, and I felt tremendous fear go through my body, almost paralyzed with fear. And then I heard telepathically, "You have nothing to fear." And I made a very conscious decision at that point to go with the wonder, and to allow myself to go with the mystery, and to allow myself to be in awe. And I got up and walked in the other room, and there were 3 or 4 more. There was 2 by the French doors, 1 standing, there was 2 in the bedroom. So there was a total of 5.
Were they the gray species that Shari was talking about?
And I didn't experience them as gray, but their skin, because they are of a much higher vibration, their skin is more translucent. It appears to be where you can see through it a little bit more.
Is that a somewhat accurate model that you have sitting by your chair?
This is supposedly one. This is called the Zeta Reticuli.
Here. Is it heavy? Is it like real heavy? Can you hoist that up here?
The little guy.
All right, now, does this pretty accurately represent what we're talking about here?
Quite
more or less? This is pretty...
Well, not
That's
color-wise to me, but
well, I was saying
otherwise,
rock,
yes.
but I mean, otherwise, this is the general configuration of the alien that we're talking about.
There's different species.
Philip Klass, a former editor of Aviation Week and Space Technology. He's a skeptic. Well, you've heard our previous guests here. Phil, first of all, your reaction.
Well,
what do you think of
while
this?
sitting back there and listening and watching the 2 ladies' story, I got a telepathic message, which seemed to be from an extraterrestrial saying those 2 ladies are telling fantasy. Now, I don't know. It was a telepathic message I got.
Well, let's assume that they're not lying, though. Because, I mean, if you're lying, then the whole show's over and we might not as well be here. So let's assume that they really do believe what they're saying.
Yes. Well,
that makes it more interesting.
Many people believe, and I'm delighted that both the ladies, as I understand it, say they were not abducted, that they were sort of voluntarily entering into this. I find it interesting that 200 years ago in England, a number of ladies claimed that they went with the devil, that the devil would come to them in the middle of the night and that they would go dancing with the devil. And that was quite a popular folklore tale that ladies told 200 years ago. Now, conceivably, the devil is now coming disguised as little ETs.
Ron, well, this is much too important an experience, not only for these 2 ladies, but for thousands of other people who've had similar experiences, to trivialize it with this kind of nonsense. There are a number of professional people who have worked with abductees, including the person who has worked with Shari, people with PhDs and so forth who have many sessions with them. It's a fairly common experience. The difficulty is much the same as it was for people who were children who were sexually abused, say, 40 years ago, where nobody would believe you. And as a matter of fact, where you became, instead of the victim, the perpetrator of telling terrible things about people in your family doing terrible things to you, when in fact it was happening. I admire their courage in speaking out. Their stories are not unique. We have many such stories. And remember, there are many cases where more than one person has been abducted at the same time. 5 psychiatrists, at least, that one of the chief investigators has worked with have apparently been abducted, and police officers and lawyers and chemists. Now, fewer than 5% of these people even let their names be used, because the stigma, as you can imagine, is pretty tough to deal with.
You brought up sexual abuse, and I wasn't going to get to it until later, but one of the theories involving abductions, and I don't mean to categorize either of you 2, involves the prevalence of sexual examinations, rectal probes, things like that. And one of the theories is that, in fact, since so many of these experiences seem to be recounted under hypnosis, that in fact what the abductees are recounting is childhood sexual abuse.
This has been a theory that has been put forth. Remember that 25% of the abductees, at least that we know about, have recounted their stories without any hypnosis and without the extraction of ova and sperm and so forth. Got a whole spectrum of experiences here. But you get people like a professor at University of North Dakota who was abducted with his son, who's gone public with it. He's never been hypnotized. For him, it was not an unpleasant experience. There are an awful lot of people telling the same stories.
But you explain that the stories are different. Some find it pleasant, some find it unpleasant.
That's the people,
some claim they were abducted, some saying they were going...
Let's
I think it's appropriate to interrupt, not to be rude, but
God forbid.
God forbid, no. There's something I want to establish because you use the word believe. You use the word believe frequently. And you were in the context of, I know lots of people want to believe. Well, I want to speak for myself. The difference between, we have, I'm sure, many common denominators, but there is a distinct difference between Athena and myself. And that is that although I'm spiritually inclined, I've meditated all my life, I have never done anything through meditation or in any other form to ask creation to perform parlor tricks for me. I have assumed without, just automatically, like there's a morning and the sun's going to come up in the morning and the night's going to appear at night.
Shari, have you ever entertained the possibility that this might be a particularly vivid hallucination?
No, I know it's not. But the point I want to make is about believing. I've had no necessity in my life to believe or even want to believe or be in the company of, quote, extraterrestrials. They became a part of my life unasked for, uninvited, with me unprepared. It was nothing I sought after. I automatically believed that in an infinite universe there is life elsewhere, and that was satisfactory enough for me.
Do I understand this correctly, that you've actually had something implanted in your neck?
Well, I'd like to back up. Now, I didn't think that I was going to talk about this, and I'm feeling a lot of different emotions because this came up. But you were talking about sexual abuse.
Yes.
Okay. I was very violently raped over 12 times when I was 6. So I guess in one sense, maybe somehow that does tie in. I don't know. I would like to say this, though. I have worked really hard to heal that issue. And because I think when someone experiences anything like that, they become very, there's a sense of feeling fragmented yourself. I have worked extremely hard to heal that, and I have felt there's been such a beautiful healing because I've released myself from victimhood from it, and I don't see my encounters as being from a position of being a victim. And the encounters that I have had have been very loving for the greatest percentage, not all, and it's helped me to even achieve a greater sense of intimacy with the whole, instead of feeling isolated or separated. Mm-hmm. It's filled me with a sense of awe of the human spirit and the many multiple ways that God, Goddess, whatever you want to call it, can express itself. And I think it's been for me an incredibly positive experience, which is, this is my truth. I'm not here to convince anybody, but it's, you know, it's only my truth.
Do you understand how the powerful emotions involved with sexual abuse, particularly in childhood, could perhaps manifest themselves in this sort of a vision experience?
Well, I would suppose so. Under certain circumstances, I don't feel that in my case at all, because I've walked through a lot of doorways and have purposely walked through a lot of pain to heal. So right, well, I don't feel that it's...
Okay, well, let's get back to the implant. Am I correct in...
No, I didn't say I had an implant.
Okay,
I just said that no, I just said that one night I felt a hand on my forehead. And it was around 3 o'clock in the morning. I got up, the dogs were barking, and a lot of animals a lot of times will go kind of crazy at that point in time. And I looked outside, and I didn't see anything. I went back to bed, but I had a feeling, and I felt a hand on my forehead, and that was in the middle of the night.
Implants are important in this discussion, incidentally.
That's true.
Yeah,
that's
Eric?
true. Now, there's a psychiatrist or a psychologist named Dr. Leo Sprinkle, who's with the University of Wyoming, and he does a tremendous amount of work with contactees and abductees. And he has found, I understand, that sexual abuse is not necessarily a big factor with those people. Now, one thing you have to ask yourself is what is the motive?
Is he a medical doctor or
he is a
psychologist?
Psychologist.
Counseling. Yes.
He's a PhD in psychology.
Okay.
And he's with the psychology. He's with the psychology department of the University of Wyoming at Laramie, and he actually runs a convention every year for contactees.
He hypnotizes a lot of
people. He regresses some of them.
Yeah. Does that invalidate to you? Does that invalidate some of the claims?
The point is that hypnosis is not a magic road to the truth. as I'm sure Eric will acknowledge. In other words, people can lie, or they can what's called confabulate. In other words, fill in memories that they don't really have. The hypnotist says, describe the person who mugged you. And if they don't really remember, they will try to unconsciously invent or confabulate.
It depends on the question and how the question is stated.
Well, it does. Indeed.
If you state the question the way he's doing it, you're going to be leading.
Abductees are well aware of the difficulties of confabulation. I've just spent considerable time with a man in Missouri who's worked with 50-some abductees. I've watched him in action, and one of the neat things he does is see if people will be led. Somebody's talking about a cattle mutilation, for example, and I was there when this happened. He said, oh, there must have been a lot of blood. And the response was not, oh, yes. It was, no, there wasn't any blood. That was one of the strange things. So there are certainly difficulties with hypnosis, not in the hands of a skilled person, as with anything else.
Okay.
But the people who do this know what they're doing, most of them.
All right,
But what do you do?
digressing a little bit here, I want to
What do you do when
talk
you
about
find
these
marks on your legs and scoops? I don't have them. But supposing you have a
minute,
row
I
of
thought we were
abductees
a
around
breaking
here,
story here.
and you find that many of the people that had hypnosis regression and had stories like they do, what if many of them start turning up with, as many of them do, strange scoop-like marks in their legs, and their thighs, on their hips, strange marks that
Strange
don't
scoop-like
belong
marks.
there,
But they're
have something-
associated with the event.
that
Yeah,
other
okay.
people don't have.
Let's hear.
I would like to say something, since I've been regressed a number of times by the head of NASA's Special Projects Division, and
Who is that?
Dr. Richard Haynes,
Dr. Richard Haynes is not head of their special project.
former
He
head
is
of.
now retired.
No.
Let's hear
now
what she has to
retired,
say.
and I had not expected to reveal his name on this show, but he's
That's all right, go
encouraged me to
Go ahead.
Come
come
out.
forward, so I think I would have his permission.
Come forward
Okay,
now.
I'd never been hypnotized in my life until this man hypnotized me. And as far as what you call confabulation, which I'm sure that's a valid constituent in the whole picture, I know, having experienced it at least a dozen times, time regression hypnosis, when you're taken back in time to an encounter and you're experiencing what they call missing time, a period of amnesia where you can't account for what's happening. In my case, I simply shut down. The same amnesia that I experienced during the encounter was present during the hypnosis, and I know Dr. Haynes sat to the side and just rode it out until I could come forward to what I could then next recall.
Do either of you have any scars or marks as a result of your encounters?
I have
with,
one here.
I know.
There-
that was
there
a
have been-
motorcycle, I believe, wasn't it?
Yeah, there have been numerous implants. One of the tricky things here about the physical evidence and details of these things is that half a dozen of the more busy investigators of these cases have intentionally withheld little details that aren't in their books, that they don't say on television, even to you. And where that serves as a benchmark, if somebody else comes up with the same little detail, then you know they didn't get it from the book, the television, etc. And these kinds of things turn up all the time. One of the other things that's important is one of the PhD theses dealing with this matter, a man collected 300 abduction cases and looked at the sequence. And there's a great consistency of sequence of events. Not all things happen to all abductees, but when they do happen, they're in the same sequence. And again, it's very hard to imagine that being connected with something that isn't real.
One thing that's always fascinated me about these accounts of abductions or contacts is that many people seem to report contacts with aliens that look just like us. Now, the chances of other life in the universe may be pretty good, but the chances that they're going to look exactly like us are slim to the point of impossible.
That's only
Why?
if life develops independently wherever it is. If there's a cross-connectedness,
Right.
How soon would that connection come, though? Because it better be, we're only separated from the chimpanzees by 5 million years.
Supposing we were placed here.
What if we're somebody's colony, somebody's crop, if you will?
Are we somebody's colony? Are we somebody's junior high school biology experiment?
This is the devil's island of this corner of the galaxy, Ron. They dumped all the bad boys and girls here, and that's why we're so nasty to each other.
Well, what about these other ones, though? Where do the different races of people come in?
How can you judge that when you're talking about an infinite universe? There may be many other planets that mimic Earth completely.
Well, there may be. I don't know that. I'm
questions
curious. I'm asking.
Ron,
I'm
why should there
confused
be
about
just
these
one
different
kind?
types of
Like,
aliens.
Why should there be just one kind? Why can't there be 25 kinds? Or
I'm not
50?
saying there can't be. I'm just curious about it.
No,
I'm
your
asking.
question
Explain
about
to me
the
why
ones
there's
who
so many
look
kinds.
like us is a very disturbing question, because there are many people who report experiences where there are the grays plus the humans as opposed to humanoids. And that we don't know. Are they slaves that are hired for the occasion, spies that are hired, crossbreeds? We really don't know.
Yeah.
I consider myself very open-minded, and I personally believe in UFOs. I think Stanton Friedman lends a lot of credibility to the subject. But this guy over here, he claims not only to have had contact with UFOs, but he's seen the Loch Ness Monster and Bigfoot. I mean, what next? You're going to say you have Amelia Earhart's corpse in your basement?
No.
You know?
Amelia, come on down.
And what about this miraculous video that we don't have, that you described at the beginning of the show? And as far as these two women...
That may have been our fault.
The producer
Okay.
will find that.
And as far as these two women on the end, I mean, what proof do you have? I can say anything I want. You can say anything you want. You know?
You want proof?
I mean, words are
unfair
meaningless.
question?
Let's see some hardcore evidence.
You
Come
want
on.
proof?
Like,
Okay, let's take for one thing
excuse
Bigfoot.
me.
We have hair and blood
Well, let's
samples
not talk about
tested by
Bigfoot, 'cause
anthropologists.
that's like that's another show.
I
So
have
let's
I'd
not
like
talk
to
about
say
Bigfoot.
something.
Athena,
I was
yes.
contacted. I did not contact the show to be on the show. I was contacted. It's not.
How can we believe you?
Wait a minute. No, I'm just saying I was contacted to be on the show. Okay? I have reverence for whatever your point of view is. This is my personal experience. I'm not here to prove any of this. I'm only here to share my experience. That's all. You don't have to believe anything that I say.
With the blonde hair.
I
Shari.
can't have, you know.
You want to know why
you.
aliens, Bigfoot,
Get to you.
and the Loch Ness Monster are difficult to prove? I can tell you why.
I don't want to know, because we're doing a show on UFOs. Sorry, Eric.
Right.
Just keep it to UFOs, or we're going to go crazy here. We got
To
a question.
Shari, my question is that you said you go into yourself spiritually. Is it possibly that if you're a true spiritualist, I'm a believer of God, and I don't understand that how you can be into spiritualism and then at the same time believe in a UFO, an unidentified flying object? I don't understand that. Can you explain that to me?
Well, first of all, if you believe in God, then, and you believe that, you know, like they say, the universe is a place of many mansions, right? That God's kingdom is made of many mansions. I'm only most familiar with this one. But because I am spiritually inclined, and I suppose I'm very quiet inside most of the time, I'm very receptive. And maybe it's people who are more receptive and less intellectual that are more subject to the less familiar events. And I want to say something. I want to say it very badly. Just like Athena, I didn't ask to be on this show. It was a request made of me to be on this show. I've had, since May 6th of 1988, along with my 9-year-old son, at least 200 close encounters of the fourth kind with one race in a multiplicity of ways that has affected our lives profoundly. We have avoided all publicity. We have stayed in the shadows. I have not been on television, been to a convention. I even avoid groups so as not for the power of suggestion of other abductees, if you will, to affect me. I've come forward this time, it's the first time, because my gut told me to, because I have a child I love, and I don't want him to suffer the way I did. I was abducted through my childhood. This isn't new. And I hope that by the time he's an adult, some of this controversy will have broken apart, and some of the answers will be revealed so that he has a good life and the rest of the people that are still here. This is an act of love. I'm not here to prove anything to anybody, but out there, there will be at least one person, if not 10,000, who are relating to me right now, because my heart is contriving to another heart.
Now, Stan, you say that there have been many instances where people have had something implanted in their head or wherever.
Yeah.
How come they don't go to a doctor, have the thing removed, and then we check it out and see what it's all about?
Well, there have been some cases where it has come out from sneezing. Usually it's placed up the nostril.
Well,
Wait,
okay.
let me get through this. Up the nostril, behind the ear, behind an eye. And there are several cases where they show up on what I'll call X-rays or MRIs, magnetic resonance images, and where the doctors have said, we're not going in for that. It's too close to the optic nerve. You know, one of these people is going to die, and then
Where are
we'll
the
get...
X-rays? Why haven't we seen X-ray pictures of this?
You haven't looked in the right place. The Fund for UFO Research... Now look, is a person going to stand up in public and say, hey, look at my head, and then say, why don't I go in for an operation? What for? What's he going to get for it? People accusing him of lying, of placing it there. If he writes a book, it's going to be in order to make money from a book. You know what I'm saying.
Yeah, I know what you're saying. Okay.
Hi. I think there's a bit of, well, confusion here. You know, I'm sitting here,
We're all
and
about confusion.
the three guys in the middle, well, the man in the middle seems okay. The two ladies at the end, I get to give a lot of credit for. Either they're really good actresses, or they've actually experienced something.
I come down on that they've experienced something. I can't vouch for its
And they're
legitimacy.
sincere,
but I
and
think
if
they-
so, I can only discern it as spiritual beings actually manifesting themselves.
So you think this is some sort of religious hallucination?
Is very possible.
Could it be a religious? People see Mary, you know, Fatima and Lourdes and all that sort of thing. Phil,
May I
let
say-
Phil
I
get into
can
this because he's
address
been out
that.
of it for a while.
May I
What do you-
address that man's
Long one.
comment?
Well, okay.
It may
and
help
then
us.
we'll let Phil jump in.
Okay, because first of all, we're all spiritual beings. Spirit's anything you can't touch, feel, or see. You're walking around in a shell there. The rest of you is a spirit. But besides that, in my encounters, which are often and almost always in groups, where they've come to do a particular thing, this race we call the Little Grays work very cooperatively with no rank, and they in no way, if you will, trespass on my soul, my belief system in God, or want to be worshipped. They do not want people to be devotees. That's why most of the people who want so desperately to, quote, believe and go out to the desert laying on their back waiting for some other ship to come take them away never have bona fide encounters, and you're right to question that.
Shari, is the Little Gray's behavior any different than the other species' behavior?
Yes.
In what way?
They're far less emotional. They
How does
are
one
more like
read alien
workers.
emotion?
They work in a very cooperative fashion. They simply come to get a particular job done. They do it on a particular time frame, and they're gone. They don't, the element of a real personal interaction isn't there as it would be with a more human personality.
They're clinical is the word that
More
keeps coming up
clinical.
over
Yeah,
and over
that would be-
again.
As opposed to which other species?
As opposed to friendly, as opposed to
The other species are
nasty.
friendly.
No, what I'm saying is that the most common word used, I think, about the Greys,
Greys,
if you will,
yeah.
is they've got a job to do and they're doing it.
Okay, I want to find out about how do they relate to the others, though? Are they different from the others? How are they different? How does it all stack up? Is there a hierarchy of aliens here? The Little Grays on the bottom, in the middle,
Don't
on the
know.
top?
Well,
That's, I'm asking.
I'll get one on your show and then we'll find
Well,
out.
that will really be a
there
ratings
is
through the
a
roof.
distinct difference.
There is.
There is a distinct.
Okay, Athena, can you address this question? I mean,
From my understanding, is that there is some discernment that needs to be used. There are some that are definitely operating more from a clinical standpoint. There are ones that have developed a lot more in the emotional aspect or the feeling
those would
aspect of their...
be which
their
ones?
name.
You have some drawings, actually.
Yeah,
You-
I do.
Zip out those drawings.
Talking about being really vulnerable here tonight.
Well,
This is a friendly one.
is that a Little Gray now, or
No.
is that's a different character? What do you call that one? Oops, I'm sorry.
I don't
the
really
briefcase
know.
one.
This is just...
What color is it?
He's the light. Most of them are light.
But this
It's-
isn't a Little Gray. This is,
No, this
are
is
they
not a little
larger?
gray. He's larger. He was about 5 foot. This is
5
the
feet
one.
tall as opposed to 4 feet for the other ones. Do you have other species?
Yeah.
That's
The
one
one
of
with
the
the hand.
previous ones, right? Okay.
Would you like to see a
And
photograph of
I
it?
would.
Yeah, you got a photograph? I want to see it.
And this is-
It looks like bushes to
We
me.
call this, in the middle, Arsenio Hall aliens because they have flat heads.
That's one of those Bigfoot photos.
This is-
No?
This is one that wasn't a pleasant experience, and that's someone
Now,
had
how
mentioned
is
the
this one
probe.
different? Because they look the same. They
No,
have big black
they
eyes
don't.
and
If
they're
you
kind
look-
of ovoid.
No, you'll find that most of them have in common though the large eyes.
And no nose and a little tiny mouth.
Yeah,
And
but
no
they're.
ears.
If you look at them,
Yeah, they do look the same.
they're different.
Well, sort of, but
Yeah.
we're in the same general family there. I mean, we're...
2 arms,
they-
2 legs, a head and a
definitely.
body, for sure.
Yeah.
But
Well, how
terrible
likely is it that other
posture.
aliens would have 2 legs and 2 arms?
Well, how likely is it that all living things on this planet have the same DNA? Amazingly enough, they do. It appears that, why aren't there 3-legged animals running around? There's certain directions in which life evolves and certain favored...
There are 100-legged animals running around, though.
Yeah.
Yeah,
There are-
even number, incidentally.
Yes, that's true. We
There's
We don't know
an answer
manimals
to
with
that
5.
problem.
I was going to let Phil say something here to the question of, could this be a religious hallucination of some sort of
first, let me
static
say
state?
that fortunately we live in a country where we're each free to believe, to accept whatever religious faith we wish to follow. And anything that gives these ladies or anyone else solace and comfort, I certainly would not challenge. What I do challenge very sharply is the claim that these aliens are abducting people, cutting flesh samples out, impregnating our young teenage daughters, removing the unborn fetuses. President Carter, President Reagan, and President Bush have taken great steps to efforts to protect and recover the rights of a few of our victims of Mideast terrorists and so on. And I feel sure that if this is actually taking place, I urge Stanton, as an American citizen, to come to Washington to alert our top officials. Let's mobilize the defenses of the nation, of the world, to defend against these atrocities.
Okay, got a
if
quick
they're
question.
real.
Okay, if extraterrestrials are technologically advanced, that would mean that most likely they're intellectually more advanced.
Yes.
Now, if that's the case, why all the mystery around it? Why the symbols, the codes? Why don't they just be either find a way to convey themselves to everyone, or to stay hidden and not to be seen at all?
Well, but why would you want them to do either one? They're here to do a job. They know we know they're here. But why do you ask me to explain extraterrestrials to you? I have had no
We
contact
don't
with
need
them.
messages in wheat fields, though. Why don't they just come out
I'm
and
not
say, hey, we're
saying that
here.
they do, Ron.
We don't
I am
communicate
not
with laboratory
connecting-
rats.
There are crop circles. Whether they have an extraterrestrial content,
So
I
you're
haven't
not
the
sure about
faintest
that.
idea.
Okay, I have an
It's an
answer for you on
interesting
that one.
mystery.
It is.
We don't communicate with guinea pigs, and we don't try and talk to them. We just treat them. And if these aliens are so far superior to us and possibly have seeded this planet with us, and if we are an experiment, which of course would upset everybody's religion very much, but if that is true, then they communicate with us at their own speed, at their own time, in their own way, and they don't care if we don't like it.
All right.
Can I share?
Pardon me, Ron, I talk to my guinea pigs, I talk to my dog,
I believe
and
it.
she understands.
Sure. And of course, our guests, Shari Levy, Stanton Friedman, Philip Klass, Eric Beckjord, and Athena Demetrios. Thank you all very much.